Hey there, I'm out at some private land, Riverside. Going to test my Ontario SP5 heavy machete. Just going to get to grips with how it feels, ergonomics and stuff. So I'm just going to hack into this tree a little bit. It's just a, it's still alive, but it's a just a gum sapling sort of thing. So I'll just get some idea about how it feels in hand. My initial impressions are that it feels quite good. There's enough space for your hands to sort of go up and down for the different types of use. So I'm just going to spend about a minute just sort of cracking in. I don't think it'll come down in that minute because it is just a knife, but it'll help me draw some impressions about how the blade feels. Overall, that feels pretty good. It's never as comfortable chopping with a blade like this as with an axe. This handle is doing about as good as a knife handle can do to minimize shock. This lip here is probably a little bit hard, and I can see what they're trying to do. It's trying to make it so you can sort of catch it as it comes back, but it might even be a little bit hard or a little bit too pronounced. So it is kind of just building up a little bit of hands, just building up a little bit of redness there. But as you can see, a couple more minutes and you could definitely have this tree down. I sort of tried all different ways of chopping just then. I was mainly doing the machete flick, which is kind of the least intensive way to chop something, where you just sort of, it's mainly in the wrist, just launch the knife, try and make contact with this part of the blade. Sort of a pretty good way of doing it. If you just want to use your arm and just smack into it, that works too. It's harder to be precise, I find, with that, because it is more of a it's a more imprecise motion, and it's less of a repetitive motion. It's more of a each time you have to think about it, and you generally end up using this part of the blade when you do that. Well, I find I do anyway. At any rate, it's definitely a sharp knife, and it definitely has the weight to chop. It's yeah, bringing chips off the wood quite well, so pretty happy with it as a chopper. Chopping is really just for the one tool option kind of jobs. When this is the only thing you have, say if you keep this in the back of a car and for some reason you need to, say there's a tree like this that's blocking the road and you need to chop it away and this is all you've got, yeah, it'll definitely do it, and it'll do it just fine. Chopping down trees with knives is a bit of a cartoonish thing in my opinion though, but it is a good, it's more of a good way to get grips with the handling of a knife and the ergonomics and such, which apart from this being perhaps a bit too hard, are really, really good. And as I said, the shock is more or less all being absorbed by this handle, and you're only sort of getting the minimal feedback through it, about on par with using like a small axe or something. Any other thoughts at this stage? I'm not big on lanyards. I find they just get everywhere and hang around, so that's why I'm not using one. I always chop in a way that if I did let go of the knife, it'd be going away from my body anyway, so that's why there's not a lanyard on. This grippiness is really, really quite good, and as it warms up it sort of becomes a bit more, I don't know, tender somewhat, and it feels even better than it does when you handle it cold. So yeah, good ergonomics, probably about a 4 out of 5. Just this little lip here is just kind of clumsy and in the way. I prefer just more of a natural swell rather than such a defined grabbing point. But yeah, as you can see, I've got through to the heartwood quite well, quite easily. So happy with this as a chopper for sure. I'm going to make a walking stick out of this sapling. It might be a good test of the knife firstly for cutting down, and secondly for yeah, a bit of carving, just the pruning and general woodworking. So let's have a look. Another thing I'm noticing is the sheath sort of, I wouldn't mind if the sheath tied to my leg in some way, because when I kind of pull the knife out, the sheath sort of scooches up like that, and then the knife comes out, which is fine, but it's just sort of a little bit insecure. The knife drops in and out of it quite well. Happy with that. It's just, yeah, pulling it out. It's almost like you need to have it on a bandolier or something, so you could just hold it and pull, but I don't really want to do that. So anyway, that's just some thoughts on the retention. I'll talk more about that perhaps at tabletop later. So I'm just going to neaten this up a bit and make it into a walking stick. Right. That's probably the most realistic use of these big knives that I think you do day by day or on occasion. Just little things like making these walking sticks and stuff. This is a good sized branch for one for me, so just do a bit more neatening, tidying, change the angle. Old hand-eye coordination failing me. Just chop through that knot pretty well. One up there too. So, yep. Good, and I reckon I will cut it off at the top. Just use the side of that big tree there for a chopping block. Alrighty, it's not too bad. I like to have a little fine tip on my walking stick. Even better if you've got a little fork like that. Just good for grabbing and using as pot hangers and all that sort of stuff as well. So if you improvise the stick. I'm going to sit down somewhere and do a bit of bark removal and carving with the knife, and we'll see how it goes at that. Alrighty. To remove the bark from my walking stick. This is the test of the fine carving ability of the knife. So we'll just pop my finger over the guard there and use that little choke spot and just do a bit of bark shaving. Edge is still pretty good. These flat grinds always take a little bit to get used to after using scandies. They sort of, you have to angle in a little bit more, I find. Scandies kind of just, they're magnetic to the wood. They just, whichever way you put them up against it, they just strip it, which is why they're such a good woodworking grind. Flat grind is more of a general purpose type grind. So what I do here is I usually remove the bark, and then you can put it over a fire, and it gives the stick a nice sort of oaky warm glow. You leave a bit of bark on. Like walking sticks you sort of make up quite usually on the fly. I'll usually leave it whenever I'll take it on my trip. I'll usually just leave it behind, so you make a new one every time. So yeah, they're all different, and there's no sort of right way to make them. It's just this is how I prefer to do it. Remove the bark. You could definitely leave the bark on. Wouldn't make a difference, but as I said, just after opportunities to use this big knife, I'd usually use something a lot smaller. This is a perfect task for my my Mora knives or my Falkniven F1s. Spider web in there. As for fine carving, how it's going, it's a little bit blade heavy, which is obvious. It's a huge knife, so it's going to be blade heavy. But it is giving me a little bit of wrist fatigue, just sort of holding it suspended like that. I'm sort of constantly battling against the knife flopping forward, which again, this is just me trying to make it fit a purpose. This isn't the purpose this knife was made for. I think we've already seen that as it did the sort of chopping and clearing before of both that tree and this walking stick. That's a bit more of a natural feel for carving. Rested on my shoulder there. It's probably just a lot of the stuff in my videos. I'm not a master woodsman. I'm not even as good as most of the YouTube guys. You want to see someone who's good in the woods, go and watch Cricket, Black Owl Outdoors, or even Nut and Fancy seems to be quite capable. I just kind of fumble my way through stuff and just make things up as I go. If you want to see the master, go watch MCQ Bushcraft. Mike over there. He's about as good as you can get, I think. So yeah, this is again just very rough, and as I said, more to gauge the feeling of the knife and just get it dirty and get it used. And it's doing really well, like as well as I would expect. A little bit of blade fatigue, a little bit of wrist fatigue, but it's definitely stripping, which is all you want, and the edge is certainly held up. I'd use a small knife to neaten this up ordinarily, but we'll get it as best as I can do it using this. Get all these ratty bits off, looking a bit disgusting. If you suspend it over a fire for a while, because it's still green wood, it'll sort of neaten up all these little wispy bits, because they'll go dry and singe off pretty quick, whereas the actual wood itself will take ages for it to burn because it's freshly cut. So for fine carving, it's just okay, which is what you expect. Like I don't want more levels of carving. If that was the case, everyone would just have this and there wouldn't be any other knives. So it's very much a tool that we would use to do everything sort of at an average level rather than doing anything great. But the idea is that it's the only thing you'd need to bring with you. So it chops about half as good as an axe, or 2/3 as good as an axe. Carves about half as well as a Mora. It carries about as well as a belt axe or something like that. But you can also use it for food prep and things like that because of its flat grind. So it's a very versatile sort of woods tool. Let's stand up there. A bit of a feel of the walking stick. You can often sort of neaten up the top a bit, but I usually quite like having just resting my palm against the resting the ball of my hand there against the top of the stick, and crow my thumb over the top. I might even that out a little bit later on. But yeah, that's quite a comfy walking stick, and yeah, as you can see, it's rough as guts. But suspend this over a fire, which I'm not sure if I could get a fire going today. I haven't really brought fire tools. But it's definitely good to sort of just lean on, and good utility just to poke and jab and that sort of stuff. And the fork at the end there, just good utility there too. So that's a walking stick, roughly hewn with the Ontario SP5 heavy Bowie. Overall, I'm really happy with the knife. I might do some stab tests later on, see how that goes. I'll report back any changes there, but I've got no doubt that a delicate tip like that, the idea is, I think, if you do need to use it for stabbing, it might even be like the beginning and end of that tip, so to do it really well, but only a few times. And I'm a little bit hesitant to abuse the knife like that because, yeah, I paid for this with my own money, and as I said, if I do need to use it one day against a crocodile, I want that tip perfect. So it definitely will, though. Yeah, it definitely sort of sticks straight in when you do start poking it into things. Very, very sharp. You could definitely use it for sort of engraving or for writing Sweetheart's name into a tree or something like that. It'd probably do that really well. So there we go. Alright, so overall, very happy with this knife. It's tested well. It's done about as well as I was hoping it would do. Competitive options for this knife, there are so many. In this price point, the other Ontario SP range are all there. Most of them are more geared towards just being big drop point survival knives. This one's got that slight sort of edge of, combat readiness. So this is in the 9-inch category. Probably the king of the 9-inch category is probably that K-Bar Becker BK9. You get a little bit longer with the RTAC series, the SE Hunglas, those types of things, but they're all about probably $70 to $80 at least, more than this one. So for the price, in the $100 range, you could go a little bit shorter and get something that's made by K-Bar, like a BK7 or a USMC, which I also picked up today. Or yeah, the other Spec Plus range of knives are also really good. You could also perhaps look into your machetes, your Ken Onion, Chance and Hell, Kershaw Camp 10, those types of things. They're about the same price, but they're made in China, so and they use inferior steels. So this is a good 1095 steel knife made in the USA, and I'm really happy with it. That should do this review, so thank you so much for watching, and I'll have a couple of other cool things on shortly. See you then.